All right. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is our final lecture of the series, Latin American Architecture and Urban Development Systems. And we're going to really end with a special lecture and lecturer, Dr. Tito Alegria, who's, he's a good friend of mine, an excellent scholar, and I'm glad that he sort of agreed to come and talk to us and kind of put it all, hopefully, under a perspective of what we've seen in the different cities. I am going to have Sarah have the honor of introducing Dr. Alegria, and then I'll have Tito then begin his conference, his lecture. So Sarah, please.
So Professor Tito Alegria is going to talk about Latin America urban systems today. He has a PhD in planning and development from the School of Urban and Regional Planning, University of Southern California, United States of America. And he's a member of the Mexican National System of Researchers, SNI Level 2. He's a professor researcher at El COLEF, assigned to be the Department of Urban Studies and Environment. Among the main distinctions is being director of the Department of Urban Studies and Environment, El COLEF, from March 2012 to October 2017, and member of the Scientific Committee of Journal Especialidades, Department of Social Science, UAM, Coajimalpa. He participates in academic networks such as the Red Nacional de Investigación Urbana de Mexico, RNIU, Red Lepro-Americana de Investigadores on Globalization and Theory, RII, and in the Consortium of the Study of Metropolitan Areas, Centrome. He's currently collaborating in projects Transboundary Region Mexico, Guatemala, intra-urban structure of interterritorial subcenters and determinants of intra-urban land prices. And his latest publication is about intra-urban subcenters, which has been published on the February 17th, 2020.
Thank you. Yes, so I just want to say Tito is a research sort of scholar at COLEF, which COLEF is a think tank that is at the border. And there's a series of them across the border, and they are part of the Mexican National Science Council. So just to kind of clear that or add a little bit more information to that. Thank you, Sarah. So Tito, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to present some facts, mainly facts, but I'm going to show some interpretations about these facts over urbanization in Latin America and some characteristics in cities, mainly about informality and urban services. I'm going to show my presentation now. René, ¿pueden verlo?
Sí, ponle ahora sí que la presentación, ponle el slideshow.
¿Ahí lo ven completo?
Perfecto.
Ok. I'm going to start showing some facts about urbanization. Latin America is the most, maybe one of the most urbanized region in the world. As you can see, the average of urbanization in the world is very below. Latin America urbanization is very close to the grade of urbanization in the global north, as United States, France. And also the path of urbanization of Latin America is very close to the Mexican urbanization path. In general, all the big countries in Latin America goes along this path. Very high, by the way, for tier world countries. This pattern of urbanizations goes along with very strong concentration in the space at national scale, and also in very strong concentration in the elite, social elite. So we have society very unequal in the space and in the among social classes. Here you can see the concentration in the prime cities in some countries, and for example, in Argentina, the gross national product is about 56% of the whole country, only in one metropolitan area. So this is a very particular also. The prime city concentrate not only the economic power, also population, of course, and also the density of communications, roads, for example, etc. So we have a extensive area in each country with very few economic activities and very low density of population. Okay, now we are going to see some features about poverty and inequality. Latin America also is the most unequal region in the world, socially speaking. The inequality, we can measure the inequality in different ways. Here I present the Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient goes from 0 to 1. 1 is total concentration, 0 is equal share in each person of the income. So you can see Latin America is below, is the highest rate in 2008 in the world. The trend around the end of the last century was to increase inequality in every country, in every region in the world. This trend changed a little bit in the first 2 decades in Latin America. Here also we have some measure of inequality on the left. This is an average of 15 countries, the Gini index. You can see this trend between 2002 and 2019. So in the first decade in this century, we have a reduction of inequality. But in the second decade, this level of inequality keeps constant. Anyway, in 2018, the share of income is clearly concentrated. The 20% richest people in the country own 51% of the income, and in the bottom of this chart, 20% of the poorest people got the 5% of the income. The level of poverty, as I was talking, was in the trend of reduction since 2000 until more or less 2010. Then it started to increase again. So at the year 2018, we have in Latin America 187 million of people under the line of poverty. And this situation, we can see this trend also with this chart. In 2002, Latin America has 71% of population in low income level. In 2019, this low income level includes 56% of population. This reduction is very noticeable, and there are some reasons for this change, particularly in the first decade of this century. But this measure I already showed are more or less average in group of income. But if we split these groups in smaller groups, we can see, as in Mexican case, that the top 10 of 1% were getting more income, real income, than the rest of society. So the middle class was losing income, and the lower income, the 50% lower income people, they almost didn't change the level of income they got. So maybe the average index, as Gini index, are showing the income was reducing and inequality was reducing, but actually the income was concentrated, the new income was concentrated in the high top of people. So inequality with this more detailed measure is very clear. The polarization of income is very clear. So why these changes, these average changes in distribution of income? Well, the main reason of this reduction in the first decade of this century was the expansion of exports. The expansion was in number of kilograms and the prices, particularly the prices of raw materials, mainly in South America. Below you can see these changes in prices in copper and in soybean, two of the main raw products, raw materials exported by the region. More or less, the change started year 2000, and after 2010, more or less stabilize the prices in higher level. So the Gini index follow this line of prices of raw materials. But also it was a policy, national policy of money transfers. Several countries, most of the countries in Latin America, decide to follow what the World Bank was advising, that people below or people out of the system, that means people with very, very bad conditions of work or very, very low income or unemployed, they need to receive some money to survive. And several countries adopt this advice. For example, President Lula in Brazil or Evo Morales in Bolivia, they decided to follow this advice, but in very huge amount. So a lot of people got this income regularly each month. So this is very important reason why a lot of poor people get higher income. And finally, remittances. Remittances sent by migrants from United States, Europe, etc., increase also.
Tito, no está cambiando la slide.
Ok. ¿En qué estoy?
En precios del cobre y...
Ok, ahí estoy. Ok, remittances grew a lot from 2000 and still is growing. And this is another source of income for low-income people in Latin America. Ok. ¿Ya cambió, René?
Sí, ya.
Yeah. Now we're going to see some features about another important process in Latin America, informality. Informality, well, there are several definitions, but in general, design or allude practice of agents, urban agents or urban actors outside of the regulatory framework in the legal sphere. So we can see any process in the city embedded with this informal practice. In that sense, the urbanism is largely informal. And you see any activity in the city has some features of informality. Informality allows solutions for lower, reducing the cost and also the quality in the short term. For any good or service that families need, or also business need. But in the medium or longer term, that produces a cost for society. That is because the informal activities, by definition, is carrying out with low productivity, economic productivity, very low, because of very basic technological advices and very low investment in any activity. And this informal practice also are regulated by the market transactions or the market practice. The informal activities take as reference this formal practice in the markets. In that sense, the informal activities make informal markets where the price or quality of the goods or services traded suffer of reduction. So if you want to buy a house, informal house, you are going to pay less than the same house, but in a formal situation. So why is the informality exist right now? Why it has been very important in society? Well, the main reason, in my opinion, is the income inequality and the poverty. And these situations is the source of legitimacy of informal practice for everyone in society. Even the richest people in society, urban society, act informally several times during the week. And also, the informality is a consequence of the nation-state weakness. This weakness is about the enforced regulation and the strengthening of justice system. So the nation-state doesn't have enough resources, institutional and economic resources, to enforce regulation. And also sometimes, several times, they don't have the will, political will to enforce regulations, because enforcing regulation can produce political conflicts, social conflicts. For example, to enforce the formal urbanization, formal lotization, is going to push a lot of families out of housing, because they would not have a place to live. So the will is very important in that sense, the will to enforce regulation. And finally, the informality is like a stone in the shoes for some part of society, but for the elites, doesn't matter informality if informality is not in the part of the business of this group of society. So they don't care about informality if the informality is not a problem for the particular business of people in the elites. So they don't have a lot of interest to modify the situation. Okay. It's very difficult sometimes to measure informality, and I am going to, in this slide, I am showing you some measures about some practice, informal practice in several, well, in all the cities in Latin America, where was possible to measure this informal practice. Of course, there are other cities. I'm not going to show all other cities. Just here are some examples only. For example, human settlements, informal human settlements or irregular settlements. It was measured in Mexico City and Guadalajara and Tijuana. And you can see in Mexico City, 60% of total area of the city was informal or was more informal in 1990. In Tijuana, I measured with the colleague this situation. We found that 53% of the territory of Tijuana was more informal. In public transportation, it's very important also the informality practice. For example, the informal trips in Bogota were 40% of total. In Lima, half of total trips were informal. In labor activities also, informal workers in Bolivia are almost 80% of total working population. In Mexico, 57%, in Chile, about 40%. In retail trade, maybe you are familiarized with the street vendors, okay? The street vendors in Tijuana are 16% of all the workers. In other cities in Mexico, the percentage is higher. And in financial access also, in Mexico, there is a very good medition. In 2018, 63% of total adults have informal savings, and 39% have informal credit. So it's a lot of population in the informal practice of finance. As you can see, in every aspect of urban society, you are going to find informal practice. So we are a society with very strong informal no sector, because the informality is inside the formal activities also. Is goes along with formal practice. It's part of the quotidian daily reality. Along the day, we can jump from formal to informal activities any day of the week. Okay, we're going to see a little more detail informal human settlements and informal transportation, urban transportation. About the informal human settlements, we can see, we can divide the informality in two big dimensions. One is the economic dimension that includes access to land and forms of commercialization. Access to land is related with how people are getting land. For example, buying land without the second dimension is urban, yeah, and this is related with regulation. Informality is when people is not following the zoning code or constructive or building code. So with these different forms of human settlements, informal human settlements, we can make a classification of particular settlements, as you can see in the chart. This is data about several countries in Latin America, related with the two first decades in this century. And the red one, the red bar is illegal occupation, that is invasion. The blue one is informal notification, that means notification without municipal permits. The yellow or orange one is formal urbanization, formal development. And the green is social housing, projects of social housing. So you can see Argentina and Peru have, Argentina, Peru, and Bolivia has very big informal notification. That means the owners of the land are dividing the land to sell lots without municipal permits and making also informal finance for families to get the house. So there are several informal activities, but what is not informal is the ownership. The owners make this division out of the permits and also sell with mortgages, well, with finance, informal finance. Okay. We are going to see the case of Peru a little with more detail. One consultant office did this study. Below is the reference. They found that the new land created from 2001 and 2018, 93% of the new land was informal. This is a huge amount. And you can see in the chart how are divided this new land. In the informal share, we have illegal occupation and informal lotizations. And the informal lotization is 41%, with the owner of the land, and 5% with only with informal commercialization. But all these type 2 informal lottizations are without permits, municipal permits. If the number 1 type, illegal occupation, is about 46%. And among them, 36% were invasion. So we have a lot of land in the periphery of cities in Peru, still now with invasion. People get the land, invading land, about a third part of the total new land in the cities are made by invasion. The formal way is very, very short, very small. So actually, that is, for me, was a surprise. Okay, because a surprise because in Mexico and Chile, for example, since well, the last 2 decades in this century, it was the formal way predominant. Most of the new land added to the city was because the owners of the land make agreement with the real estate companies, building companies, and they produce a lot of houses. They get the families, and the Infonavit is para state, or almost a state agency, to give loans to family mortgage. They make this arrangement to have families, have loans to families for 15 or 20 years to pay these loans. So the formal way was predominant in Mexico and Chile. More or less 90% in Mexico, 90% of the total new houses in Mexico in these last 20 years were through the formal way. Recently, maybe the last 3 years, 4 years, the informal way in Mexico is increasing because these new rules in Infonavit, the agency to make these loans for housing. These new rules said the loans are comes with subsidized subsidy. These loans comes with more or less 10 or 15% of subsidies. So this money, 10 or 50%, goes to families if they buy a house not in the periphery, but in the more inside the city. New houses now are very few formal new houses because there are less money from the loans. That means a lot of people, they don't have opportunity to access the finance because they don't have enough income to buy a house in the city, because the houses have higher prices, because the land price is higher in these more older parts of the city. The lower price, the land lower price are in the periphery, but in the periphery are now very few houses, new houses in informal way. So we have in Mexico this problem in the last 3-4 years that each year more families are not, they don't have possibilities to access the finance because the houses are too expensive for their income. So a lot of families are invading now. Again, after 30 years or 25 years, they are invading again. In any part in Tijuana, for example, you can see in the periphery, in the hills, new houses, new shanty, very raw houses, new, maybe 1 or 2 years old. Invasion of the land is again back. Okay, but in Peru, it was for the last 20 years. And it is a surprise because also Peru had this economic expansion. What you can deduce, contrasting this data of housing with the data, economic expansion data, is that the economic growth were get by the elite. It wasn't dropping to the lower income people, this the product of this economic growth. Okay, here we have the maps of the 2 biggest cities in Peru, capital Lima and Arequipa, second city in population size. You can see the red part in the periphery is illegal occupation, invasion. In blue is informal lotizations. Yellow, formal urbanization. And the green one is social housing projects. And in white is the city in 2001. So you can see the predominance of the red color, illegal occupations in both cities. Okay, to live in these informal settlements means to have family of a lot of members. most of them are children living in overcrowding condition, very few meters per person in these houses, limited access to public services like drinking water, sewage, electricity, limited garbage collection, low quality of any of these services. For example, interruption of electricity or water services, pipe water, etc. Also means less accessibility, means a longer time from these informal settlements to place of work, place for health services, education services, cultural or leisure space also. So less accessibility to any facilities or urban resources for people. Okay. Now we are going to see the informal transportation very fast. Also, it's very difficult to measure the informal transportation, but some measure, very few, but some, says that we have informal transportation in more or less between 30 and 40% in Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Panama City, and about 40% in Bogota and about 50% in Lima. So the size of the informal transportation is very huge. Informal means that the municipal government not only doesn't have plans, transportation plans for a part of the city, lot area in the city, but also they don't have, maybe they have regulation, but they don't have the ability or capacity to enforce this regulation. And also the private service, transportation service, also they don't have the interest or the financial capacity to compete with this informal way, informal transportation, because the informal transportation is based on the competition for lanes, streets, and competition for passengers. This is a free market, totally free market. It's like a wild free market. Wild because sometimes they end fighting physically for lanes or for passengers.
Does this include Uber?
Hello?
Does it include Uber?
Uber? No. Uber is very new, and also, yes, they sometimes they fight also, but not for the same reason. Uber is not, is in the middle, is half regulated. In some cities, they are paying in taxes, in some others not, but now they have to have a registration. For example, in Mexico, It's a new rule to have a registration of all drivers. But in other countries, they don't have registration. This is in transition time. Okay, in the chart we can see more or less the situation of several cities according to level of regulation or level of fragmentation. Fragmentation means without the command of office planning the correspondence, for example, feeder to main line, main route, main bus. This or stops, regulation for stops. So we can have regular time between buses. So fragmentation means any bus or car or van work without coordination with other vehicles. And we have a lot of very diverse level in fragmentation and regulation. So the less regulated are La Paz and Lima, and the more regulated are Sao Paulo and Curitiba. Maybe you hear about Curitiba. It was a model for BRT system for Latin America. BRT is a bus rapid transit system. Now, this is a system that any big city has in Latin America, and several cities, middle-sized cities in big countries like Mexico, for example, and there are several cities with this system. Exclusive lane with prepaid ticket, etc. Some characteristics of the BRT system, very good for solution in main roads.
Yeah, we looked at Transmilenio.
Okay, Transmilenio is very old, very good example. This solution, the BRT system, was a solution for more longer streets or avenues. But in the areas with shorter streets or in the periphery of the city, the density is lower than necessary to make profits. So it's impossible to extend this system for every part of the city. And that was the reason why the informal transportation survived. Informal transportation usually gives the service in the periphery, lower density and lower income people. So we are going to see some previously. Okay, not only in the periphery, but mainly in the periphery, but the formal transportation was everywhere in the city. For example, in Bogotá, Fortaleza is a better example, and Caracas. In Fortaleza in Brazil, the informal service, bus informal, is 53% of people taking this bus 10 minutes from home. In 10 minutes from home, also, people in Fortaleza, 51% of people in Fortaleza get the informal both in the informal settlement. The settlement type is two types, formal and informal, in the horizontal row. And below we have both formal or informal. So you can see in Fortaleza is almost the same, formal or informal transportation in formal or informal settlements. In Fortaleza is almost the same, formal or informal service, transportation service. And in Caracas, we have the informal service, transportation service, higher in the informal settlements. 77% of people take or have this service 10 minutes from home. So in any part of the city, in some of cities. I'm not going to talk about all these opinions, but there are some positive and negative opinions about this informal service. The first positive characteristic is the ubiquitous service. It's ubiquitous. Any part of the city, you can get informal service in almost any city in Latin America. Second is affordable. That means the ticket costs less than the formal service. And another characteristic, very important characteristic, is the adaptation of routes. The informal buses or vans change lanes, change routes, change streets according to the demand. They adapt the route according to where people is asking for the service. So it's very important for new areas, expansion areas in the city. And the negative for users, the negative characteristics are mainly the quality of service. It's almost always overcrowded bus and possibility of sexual harassment for a woman. And usually drivers don't follow the regulations, traffic regulations. Okay, so you can see that there are positive and negative characteristics, and at the end, we need to work with these characteristics, positive and negative, because the informal service is not going to disappear with the will of the government. Actually, there were several attempts to reduce the informality in transportation, urban transportation, but now it's only in the more formal parts of the city where the BRT system exists, where the informal service reduce, not disappear, reduce. So the attempt to eliminate the informal service is a lost war. It's better if the government do not attempt to disappear the service, informal service, but learn how to work with this informal service to improve quality. It's the same with any informal activity in cities, housing, informality, informal activity. Actually, some governments, local governments, are in this path. For example, in several cities in Mexico, the municipal government charge a fee to street vendors. The condition is they have to be in some streets, not in every street. In some streets in downtown, for example. In Tijuana, for example, we have 3 areas in downtown where these street vendors can be. And they pay fees to the municipal government. So this type of policy are more practical, more intelligent than try to eliminate informality. Informality is here in Latin America because give solutions that people don't find in the formal way to make the things. Formal markets or official, following the regulation, local regulation, housing code, etc. So we need to recognize this existence is not going to disappear. Yeah, and now they are increasing, expanding, particularly in housing, irregular housing in Mexico, for example, and in Peru also. Okay, this we are going to see very fast these 2 things, the urban services.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Well, water and sewage. We have in the these first 2 decades in this century very noticeable improve in the connection of houses to the urban red of pipe water and sewage. For example, 92% have connection of to pipe water. Well, this is a lot of, if you compare this number with 30 years ago number, you are going to see the difference. Okay, treatment of sewage is very poor, and some cities are total sewage has this treatment, but in another cities almost nothing. In Caribbean, almost nothing. Rates. This has been a concern of World Bank maybe for 50 years. The problem is how people, lower income people, can pay for the service. So in several cities in Latin America, the government gives some subsidy, but in some very few cities, people is paying for total cost. For example, in Tijuana, we pay for total cost of the pipe water and drainage. There are some exceptions. Most of the cities, the government subsidize these services. This is the cost, the problem, and also the price of the service. The UNDP have this threshold to pay. The payment shouldn't exceed 3% of household income, but in a lot of cities, very important part of the population, they pay more than 3% of the income. And also in some cities, the cost of connection is very high. For example, in Cochabamba and La Paz. And that is one reason why they don't have the connection. Not for the service, but for the cost of connection. Another big problem is discontinuity and quality of service. For example, water quality is a problem for any person in cities. People don't want to drink from the
faucet.
See. They buy water in bottles to drink. But the shortage, they are related with income, family income. So poor people, they have more shortage than richer people in each city. And also, if they don't have piped water, they pay a lot of water coming in cisterns. In Cochabamba, for example, the cost of cisterns is 7 times more than water from pipe connection. This is a lot. In Tijuana, it is about 5 times more. And for drainage, of course, it's very difficult to find information, and particularly for leaks. And treatment is very inefficient, etc. So we have very big problems with drainage and treatment. And with this, I finish this presentation. I have some more slides, but there is no time. Usually there are several topics. There are more topics to review for Latin American cities. Each topics, well, we see very fast each topic now.
Great.
But you can have an overview about the situation of urbanization in Latin America. So we can have now question and answers, Rene?
Yes. Yeah, we have a few minutes. So I'll have Sarah maybe begin the Q&A session.
Yeah, I have a question here. I do not know if there is a legitimate answer for it here, but I just want to ask it. I come from a city that has informalities outside, and as it moves inside, there's more formalities in it. I know that, I come from that kind of urbanization that has informalities and formalities, and I have seen from time to time that government put effort, put infrastructure in services to make those informal areas semi-formal. They just destroy some areas, take out some houses to build roads, to put cinemas, parks, stuff like that. But however, when the project is done, a year later, it looks exactly the same as the whole other neighborhood. People, I think that my question is, when the people are not educated enough to how to treat them, or because we don't change the source of income of those people who live in that area, for example, if you change the roads in an area, you cannot prevent people from washing their cars in the main street, because that's what they know, And I've seen that, and that will destroy the renovation on that area. So do you have any what is that? Any suggestion on how to educate people, or like how to deal with this problem so that it doesn't go back to what it was before the renovation, or making it semi-formal?
Well, it's very complicated. No. In Latin America also appeared that situation. What is, in my opinion, people need to be part of any change in the real environment to appropriate of that change. That could be in the process of construction or in the process of use of that new real environment. For example, when people, when the government make a field court for basketball or small football in Latin American cities or in Mexico, in Tijuana, if the young people do not take this court to make exercise, to make sports, the court is going to be a place for trash.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to get good targets for any community, neighborhood,
okay.
to know exactly what they want, because they are going to keep, if they want something, they are going to keep care about. Sometimes there are no young people in one neighborhood because it's an old neighborhood. So a new basketball court is not going to make any change. It's better to make a all people place with trees, with something different, where all people go to talk each other, make or play chess or etc. In some parts in Lima, for example, there are tables of cement with chess.
I see. Yeah, we have that as well.
There are lots of people, they like chess, so they go every afternoon to meet other players. So it depends. What is important is people need to be part of. People, they need to own this mine. No? They want to defend if this is mine.
Exactly.
That's my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Any other question from the audience? We'll open it up.
I was just going to make a comment talking about Sarah. It's the same kind of thing that Mayor Volkus in Bogota kind of ran into when he started putting the mimes out that you people have to drive. And he was trying to change how the
sorry, Brooke, I can't hear enough.
Can you hear me?
You are closer to your computer.
The Mayor Mokus in Bogota. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Enough.
Yeah, what is his name? Antanas Mokus in
Antanas Mokus.
Yeah, in Bogota. His big thing was trying to change people's behavior in the beginning, which sounds a lot like what Sarah's kind of alluding to, is that he's trying to change the behavior before he could really implement or get like any city services and stuff. It just reminded me of that. That's my only comment.
I don't know, Tito, if you remember that when Antanas Mokus went to the street and he hired these mimes and to sort of teach people how, especially car drivers, not to go into the pedestrian lane, and he did all these sort of kind of activities before implementing sort of physical change in the city. So he was trying to change behavior first. And I guess that's what he's saying. Or
was he successful in that?
What I would think.
I think I mean, they have a very successful bus transit system and things in Bogota. I think he was pretty successful.
Great.
He was the mayor of Medellin, if I remember, no? Mogus.
Yeah. I think it was Medellin.
Mm-hmm.
Because Peñalosa was Bogota. All right. Any other question from the audience? It's open. Before we leave, we have a chance for one more. So this is your chance. Don't be shy. Anybody? Any guest that also would like to ask a question?
I think Ivan had...
Reno, can I?
Yeah. Oh, Ivan. Nice to meet you from all the way from...
thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Tito, for presentation.
From Poland. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I want to ask two very short questions. The first is links to question of Sarah and question of Brock. Also, what is the source of changes from your perspective? Because state is not so much interested in the change of behavior or change the situation. What is the main stakeholders of new idea of cities? Yes, urban communities, some maybe state communities cooperation or external power. What is the source of changes? Yes. And the second is what is the relation between informality and violence? Yes, because if you get informal property rights, you need to participate in very strange behavior. And what is the informality is the basis for some social and criminal risk in the new urban areas?
Okay, informality is not new. Informality has been in the cities in Latin America for all the 20th century.
Yes.
And the violence, as we know now, is new. It's 20 years ago,
Yeah.
25. So informality maybe is part of need conditions, but not the determinants of the new violence. New violence is related with, in my opinion, with two related processes. One is the retraction of the state. The state retraction means there is no services for young people. For example, 30 years ago, the government in Mexico City organized young people in the spring vacation to go to places out of the city. The government was organizing that. It's more or less what's in France, the regional governments make now. But now doesn't exist that services. Also, in any aspect of the life, the state has some stake 30 years ago. But now the state is in the office. There is very few services the state is giving. That is related with the neoliberalism point of view. The government was following this point of view. So also the retraction of the state means the state has less power to influence people through, for example, unions. Unions in Mexico have very strong power, but now they don't have. For example, unions decide to share of housing, housing financed by the state. Some houses to some unions, and the union share these houses among the members of the union. That it doesn't exist anymore. So there were a lot of ways to control people giving services like this, and doesn't exist anymore. And this is along with going along with the increase in inequality. Inequality was increasing since 40 years ago. So there are more people with more education, but with less income. And this combination of more people with less income in a society where the rich people, they don't be shy to show the richness, the wealth, the family wealth, the personal wealth. So it's, I think it's very important demonstration effect. Young people want to live that kind of life, and they don't care if that is going to span for 5 years. At the 6th year is going to be dead. They want to live that life. So a lot of people get involved in drug trafficking because they want to live that life now, not 20 years later, after 20 years of work to get some better life. And some see it's impossible to jump to better life in any way. So they decide to go to shortcut. There are a lot of people in that situation in Mexico because now it's a very urbanized society. Almost, I think every adult and child has a cellular, mobile phone. So they receive a lot of information about different ways of life. 20 or 40 years ago, this was impossible. Poor people, they didn't know how the rich people in the society actually have the life. Now they know, and they want that type of life. This is what I think is new. And I think young people is in that situation now, seeing there is no future for the life.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Tito. Well, I need to close the session since we already went over our class time, and I know some students have classes they need to go to. So I want to thank Tito for the lecture, and if you would like to see it again, we will put it up in the Gibbs School of Architecture YouTube channel, so you can look for that on YouTube. And hopefully we'll have that up as soon as possible. And so Tito, thank you for your time and for the great lecture. Sara for being a host, and everybody for coming to the lecture. And yeah, so I'll see everybody else, my students, on Thursday.
Okay, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, see you. Thanks, everybody.